I'm waiting for you, Tyler. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us today for this press conference. As everybody knows, the 2022 regular session will end at 6 p.m. on Monday, if not before, and with the backlog of bills that they're working through, I suspect it will be 6 p.m. on Monday. So I did want to make myself available to you today to answer some questions related to the session as we close it out, but also to give you a little information about COVID, but also about hurricane preparedness. You all know that I've just recently signed into law a number of bills, and I've been doing that as they're presented to me. But there's a number of bills that I think we can be particularly proud of, especially the budget for the state of Louisiana this year. It is a responsible budget that invests heavily in our most critical priorities. For example, education at every level, infrastructure across our state, both maintenance and preservation, but also capacity projects. With respect to education, I believe this is the best budget for higher education in at least a generation, if not in our state's history. And I want you to think about that for just a moment, because it was before I became governor that we were disinvesting in higher education more than any other state in the nation. And more than anything else that was happening during that time period, that really threatened the future of our state, the success of our people. It threatened prosperity, opportunity, you name it. So I'm very proud of what we've been able to do for higher education. We've certainly come a long way. It makes critical and very significant investments in early childhood education, which I believe more than anything else that we can do, that is the key to our future. And we have to adequately fund early childhood education for a generation. And if we can summon the will to do that, we will transform our state like nothing that we've ever done in terms of breaking those cycles of poverty that seem to be intergenerational and seem to be concentrated in certain parts of the state more than others. And with the investment that we've made, we're creating more slots, but we're also creating higher quality slots for our youngest children. The budget, this was the seventh budget that I've presented to the legislature, the seventh that I've signed into law. This is the fifth pay raise for K through 12 teachers, and really it's all workers in our K through 12 schools, but all of our certificated personnel will get a $1,500 raise. And others, support workers, will get a $750 raise. So that's the fifth pay raise in 7 budget cycles. It is the largest one ever. I think we can all be proud of that. It's a huge step in the right direction. It wasn't as much as I thought we should have given them, and it's not as much as we could have afforded to. But at the end of the day, I do appreciate the willingness of the legislature to grant the biggest part of my request, and we're going to keep working on that for next year. And we all know that our teachers are not being paid at the Southern Regional average, and I think that should be an important goal for us, because we are in competition with other states for teachers, especially as we see fewer and fewer people enter the profession and more people leave the profession earlier. It is very important that we have pay in place that incentivizes people to become teachers and to remain in the classroom. And then during COVID, over the last couple of years, we had teachers in all of our classrooms. Our state had the 5th or 6th most in-person education throughout the pandemic of all the states in the nation. If you all will remember, there were some hybrid situations, but we went back in person in August of 2020. Most states didn't do that. And so we have seen our teachers step up time and time again, and we're going to have to keep stepping up for them. And not just for them, but for all of us, because we have to have teachers in the classroom if we're going to advance the way that we want to here in Louisiana. Getting back to higher education for just a moment, I do believe it's the best budget in a generation at least. And there's additional funding for the formula. There is additional funding for specific programs. we did give them funding to pay for all of their mandated cost increases, but also there's $31 million there for faculty pay raises. They too aren't at the Southern average, but this will go a long way to allowing all of our various systems and the institutions to grant much needed pay raises to higher ed faculty. Working with the legislature, we have also been able to make historic investments in large scale infrastructure projects like the new Mississippi River Bridge here in Baton Rouge. And you saw late last week, they have limited it down to 3 different sites for that bridge. That is exciting. But also the new bridge on I-10 in Lake Charles, the I-49 Lafayette connector, and other projects all over the state, both capacity projects and preservation and maintenance projects. Because of our efforts, not just this year, but over the course of the time that I've been governor, because of our collective efforts to match revenue and expenditures, to pay off debt, not to incur additional debt if it's not necessary, Moody's recently upgraded Louisiana's issuer rating, I should say, and revised our outlook from to stable. And we did that working with the legislature. And again, we proposed a budget and they actually signed into law a budget that refused to spend any non-recurring revenue on recurring expenditures. In fact, this year, there was well over $200 million in recurring revenue that was allocated to non-recurring expenditures. Now, that is sound fiscal policy. And before I take your questions, I do want to touch on those other 2 issues I mentioned. As you all know, yesterday was the first day of hurricane season. Unfortunately, the forecast is for more storms than normal and for stronger storms than normal. I don't know what that means for us here in Louisiana because we've had 5 in the last 2 years, and 2 of those were the strongest to ever hit our state. But what I do know is this: because we've had more than our fair share of the last 2 years, it doesn't mean that we won't get more than our fair share again. And of course, we don't want any, especially since so many people along the coast, whether it's Southwest Louisiana because of the storms in 2020 or Southeast Louisiana because of Hurricane Ida in 2021, they are still recovering. And they are not postured in a way to withstand the damaging effects of a storm. So there's all sorts of reasons why we don't want one. And we're going to do everything we can to pray and to prepare. But the preparation is so critically important. I did just get off of a phone call a few minutes ago with Secretary Mayorkas of the Department of Homeland Security. He called in to speak to me and to Casey Tingle, who is the director over at GOSAP, and to make sure that we are fully coordinated, and we've actually had FEMA folks from Region 6 embedded with us for a long time. And Tony Robinson, who is the regional administrator for FEMA Region 6, was actually in the state a couple of weeks ago so that we could continue to work on that coordination. So I know it's kind of hard for people to think about hurricane season, especially those who are still recovering. But I'm asking everybody to do just that. And we have had hurricanes in the last few seasons that have popped up early. Because I know a lot of people say, well, until I get to August or September, that's when these things really happen. I'm not going to pay attention. Well, we have to be ready throughout hurricane season. So please get a gameplan.org is the place you need to go to for that checklist of things that you can do to better prepare yourself and your family for hurricane season. And for those of you who are still rebuilding, and if you want to participate in the Restore program with the funding that we have just been made available through Congress and the appropriation of community development block grant funding for housing, please go to restore.la.gov and sign up so that your home can be inspected, and you just make it that much easier and faster once the program is up and running, which it will be up and running very soon for Southwest Louisiana. And we actually have our state action plan out for public comment right now on Southeast Louisiana as well. So wherever you are along the coast, if your home was damaged and you want to participate or see whether you're eligible to participate in the Restore program, please go to restore.la.gov and sign up to have your home surveyed. Or you can call 866-753-2001. Let's see. It has been a while since we've talked about COVID. We are having an increase in cases, and we've been having over the last several weeks, an increase in our percent positivity as well. And obviously that's always concerning. The good news is we're not seeing the corresponding increases in the levels of hospitalization that we have seen previously. Now, we do have more people in the hospital as well. We have over 200 people in the hospital. We had gotten down to about 60. But I'm asking people to understand COVID is still out there. There are things you can do now to protect yourself and your family. That being vaccinated and being boosted is critically important. We know that the protection afforded by both natural immunity, meaning you've had COVID, or from a vaccination does wane over time. And so please take advantage of boosters when you're able to do that, especially when you have increasing percent positivity like we have right now. The statewide percent positivity right now is 9.3%. And of course, these are these Omicron variants that are extremely contagious, if not more virulent. Would ask for your assistance in all of that, and we have some reason to hope, at least, and of course, until it happens, you never can be sure, that we will plateau again in the next couple of weeks, because it appears that we were up 2 to 3 weeks behind New York and Massachusetts and other states in the Northeast. It appears that they have plateaued in the last several days. Hopefully that's going to happen here, but we can't be certain of that. But the thing you can do is make sure that you are vaccinated, that you are boosted, and that you're taking care of yourself while we do have this increase in cases and in our percent positivity. So with that, I'm going to take a few questions. Tyler, last one in, the first hand up.
Thank you, Governor. Just a quick technical question and then a broader question on the budget. What is the ultimate increase in the pay raise for faculty with the line item veto that you did?
I can give you the amount of money. Yeah, but I can't do it that way. I'm going to explain it why. So there's $31 million. That's what we had requested, and that's what will be in the budget that became effective after I exercised a couple of line item vetoes on some money items to restore the funding that was necessary, and did some language, vetoed some language out of the appropriations for the pay raise for the systems of LSU, Southern, and the University of Louisiana system. So it's $31 million. But depending on different plans in place at the various institutions, the pay raise may not be uniform for everybody. So I can't tell you that is enough for a 5% raise, but not everybody is going to get a 5% raise, because lower paid people may get a little higher, higher paid people may get a little lower, that sort of thing. So I can't tell you that everybody is going to get the same percentage raise, but the full $31 million, which represents, if you do that, the amount that would be necessary for a 5% raise, but that's not the way it's done.
I thought that was the second question.
Yeah.
The question I thought was called hospital plan 92, which is the supplemental funds.
Mm-hmm.
You have traditionally been light in your exercising the line item veto, but you had some very inviting targets there with money for churches, a splash park, a civic association, a public golf course, and yet you did not line item veto a single project in there.
Yeah. Well, as you mentioned, I've never been heavy-handed with respect to line item vetoes, whether it was in House Bill 1, House Bill 2, the capital construction budget, or in the supplemental bill. And quite frankly, that was a bill that came together very late, as you know. And there were an awful lot of projects that were added late. It would have been very hard for me to articulate reasons for line item vetoes and then not apply that to just an awful lot of projects. And at the end of the day, I didn't do that because if I veto a project, that money isn't available to go somewhere else. It will show up as excess in the current year whenever the revenue estimating conference gets together. And so at the end of the day, I just decided that the better course of action for me was to do what I did, which was to not exercise line item vetoes on the supplemental bill. And what I did was limited the vetoes where I could to achieve the priorities that I had set out ahead of time, which is why I restored the funding for that $31 million available. And of course, that was in House Bill 1, not in the supplemental bill. Yes, ma'am.
This is kind of a follow-up to Tyler's question. I mean, last year you did veto some projects out of the bill. Some of the people whose districts had projects vetoed out of the bill were Representative Miguez, Representative McCormick, if I'm remembering, and maybe a couple other people. And some of those people don't have projects in the bill this year. I mean, they were pretty public about not having projects in the bill. So is it that you didn't want to veto anyone's projects, or maybe people who you might have wanted to veto their projects don't have projects in the bill?
Didn't you just answer your own question?
For confirmation.
No, I mean, I mean, there was, that did not come into play, but I can't tell you that had they had projects that it wouldn't have. It just didn't. It just didn't. Sam, good for you to join us. Yes, ma'am.
I understand the Ronald Green Special Committee asked you to testify. Have you had time to think about it, made any decisions yet?
Yeah, well, I think we responded yesterday that I will be happy to testify. We got to work out the timing of it because the National Governors Association has a 3-day conference here in Louisiana, I think on the day that they asked. But we're working to make sure that I can do that, whether it's that day or another day. But we'll get that done. And and I appreciate the question because what's been playing out in the media most recently has to do with the Clary video. And so I want to address that for just a second. If you all will remember, we were asked by the Green family through their lawyers, but also from some Black Caucus members and others, in I think it was the September, October 2020 time period, to make the videos of that incident public. When we reached out to the U.S. Attorney's Office, who was handling the prosecution there and doing the investigation, we were told not to do that because the fear was it would compromise their investigation and prosecution. So we then went back to them and said, okay, we won't make it public. Can we bring in the family, their lawyers, and the Black Caucus members, Representative Sample, and show them the videos? And they said yes. And so I directed the state police to make those videos available and then coordinated to have those individuals come in, most of whom had to come in from out of state. I went over and watched the videos that they were going to show to the family, but also looked at other things in the investigative file, including the autopsy report, toxicology report, and other things that were in the investigative file. And a couple days later, and when I say a couple, it may not have been two, a few days later, those same videos and that same material was made available to the family, shown to them when they came in a few days later. And what I don't understand, and I've said I don't think there's a good explanation for it, is why that Clary video wasn't included in the investigative file that was given to the district attorney in, I think it was August of 2019. I don't know. When I went over and looked at the video, when the videos were shown to the members of the family and their lawyers and the Black Caucus members, I had no idea that what I was seeing hadn't been turned over, or that there was a difference between the videos that were available in the internal affairs file as opposed to the investigative file. That was something we learned, I think, in April of the next year. So there's no excuse for it. I didn't know about it, but I was the one who directed that those videos be shown. And as it turns out, it appears that the state police did in fact show the Clary video, not just to me, but to the group that came in a few days later. And that's evidenced now, I think, by a statement from one of the Green lawyers, but also from Lieutenant Colonel Eskew, who actually was the one who put the videos together and showed them to me, and then a few days later showed them to the family and the lawyers and so forth. But also, Tina Vanishagorn, who works for me, happened to be in the room when I saw the videos, and then a few days later in the room whenever they were shown again. And she too says very clearly that the Clary video was shown. And I think you all saw some information that was sent from the lawyer who was working for the Green family that showed notes taken contemporaneously as she watched the videos. She says it's the Clary video, and then she took notes on things that were only depicted in the Clary video. So I think this is another instance of the media reports getting the substance of their report just very wrong. And I don't know how to account for that, but what I just told you is exactly how it happened, and that's what I intend to tell folks downstairs when I testify. And of course, the truth, as I've said all along, is good for me. I know what the truth is. I've spoken the truth the whole time, and so long as we're all pursuing the truth, then everything is going to be just fine. Yes.
Quick follow-up to that and then another question. So the biggest discrepancy that seems to remain is that John Belton maintains that he didn't see this video at this October timeframe and never saw it until April. Yet it seems there's other accounts that say he was the one showing these videos to the family. I mean, can you talk to him about this? Do you think he's mistaken? What's going on?
Well, what I think the most likely explanation is, and it really you have to talk to him, is that he's mistaken. And I want to just kind of go back to that day. That was in early October of 2020. So we're in the first few days of our second hurricane that season, working at GOSEP during a pandemic while there is a special session of the legislature. And that was a very emotionally charged day with the family members there, with the lawyers there, the Black Caucus members. And I wouldn't be a bit surprised if memories were not perfect. In fact, you know, when you ask somebody a year or year and a half after an event exactly what happened and what didn't happen, you know, they're mistakes all the time. It doesn't mean that those are intentional. And I certainly don't think that about Mr. Belton. I think he is a good, honorable man. My best guess is, and it's more than a guess for the reasons that I just mentioned, I think he is mistaken about this.
Second question about a completely different subject. So, with the possibility of Roe v. Wade being overturned, Louisiana's laws are going to say there are no exceptions in our ban except for the life of the mother. No exceptions for victims of rape or incest. The legislature is actually debating that as we speak. What is your position? Should there be a...
The amendment failed on this issue.
Right. So what is your position? Should there be, do you believe there should be exceptions for victims of rape and incest? And do you believe that it should be zero except for the life of the mother?
Well, as you know, I've got a long history of being pro-life. I am pro-life. I do believe that with respect to rape and incest, there should be exceptions. I said this a number of times, most recently on last month's radio program. And for me, the question is, should a rape victim be made by force of law to carry the rapist's baby to term? And then you can answer the question another way. And this is not a question that never happens. I mean, this really happens. Should a 13-year-old be required by force of law to carry a baby to term that is there because of incest from her stepfather? For me, to ask the question is to answer it. And I don't believe that the law should force that. I believe that that ought to be up to those individuals to make that decision under those circumstances. I do believe that that's where the vast majority of Americans are, and I think that's where most Louisianans are as well. And up till now, and we're all sort of looking ahead to what may come, I think, as early as late this month, it's been a largely academic exercise. And I think it's going to become more real if in fact the Supreme Court does what's been reported that they're most likely to do. But I am comfortable in saying on the record that I clearly support additional exceptions for rape and incest, because under the trigger law that we would revert to, as you know, there is an exception for life or serious health consequences for the mother. I think those other two exceptions ought to be added. Yes, ma'am.
Just to clarify, and they added in a third exception today to the bill that Katrina's running. They added in an exception.
Yeah, and you know, that's always a problem when I'm
Right.
talking to you about
Sure.
something that's actually happening down there, because I don't know what they just did.
There's now an exception if the unborn child fetus, depending on how you define it, if they're not viable, can't live outside
Yeah.
the womb. Following up on what Sam said on the similar subject, this might happen this year, and I think it happened a couple years ago. There have been bills where people have tried to add exceptions for rape and incest since you've been governor that have gone through. I believe Julie Stokes tried to add an exception in 2019. I apologize, I had just lost my job, so I don't really remember that clearly. So I'm curious whether that is going to have any effect on how you view the bill that Senator Jackson's running right now and is likely to pass.
Well, if yeah, well, you're not, but I think I know where you're going. Yeah. Well, that bill doesn't really chart new ground. It tries, as I understand it, and by the way, there were a lot of amendments to that bill today too that did get on, and I always reserve the right to read bills. My understanding is that bill was trying to clean up and harmonize various statutes that had been passed over the years. And sometimes they use different definitions and reference different sections of the law, but they were all passed to protect life at different points, whether it was 20 weeks, 15 weeks, heartbeat, or completely. And so I think that's what she was trying to do, but there was a whole host of amendments that I haven't been able to review. But if that bill doesn't, I would prefer that it contains an exception for rape and an exception for incest. But if it doesn't change the law that's otherwise going to be on the books in that regard either. And so I really don't want to go anywhere near veto language on the bill, because vetoing the bill wouldn't accomplish what I'm saying I would like to have, and that is the exceptions for rape or incest and incest.
I asked you like a couple weeks ago about whether you think, what you think Louisiana might do if there is an abortion ban enacted here, and we have more people who are maybe in crisis situations in terms of their pregnancy. Do you feel like the state's equipped to deal with potentially more people? I don't know how to put this, but being vulnerable.
Well, yeah, and first of all, there's a lot of people who believe that those individuals who want to have an abortion and have the means to travel will still be able to do it. They just won't do it here. And so those who would give birth to a baby who otherwise wouldn't, I do believe that we have an obligation to the mother and to the child to do everything that we can to assist and make having that baby the most viable option available or possible, I should say. And that manifests itself in a lot of ways with additional resources to crisis pregnancy centers to make sure that there is nutrition assistance, extending the amount of coverage through the Medicaid program for mothers from 3 months after they give birth to a full year, because that's good for both the mother and the baby, obviously. And there's a whole host of things that we can do. It's sort of it's to try to figure out. First of all, we're assuming what's going to happen in the Supreme Court, and we don't know that yet. And if it happens the way that you premised your question, we're assuming we have an idea of how many people that are going to have babies who otherwise wouldn't have and what their needs are going to be. What I know is we need to do more so that we're as prepared as we can be and we're assisting as many as we can. That's what I know. And if this happens, I suspect we're going to have a period of time where we're going to learn what the true impact of it is. Yes, sir. Yeah.
The Senate passed a bill that was heavily amended today that basically, and it was said on the floor that you were pretty adamant you didn't want new licenses to be made. Instead, you wanted satellite locations. So that's what they did. They opted instead to give it to the 9 or 10 existing licenses, let them keep their monopoly. So I guess my question is, is that true that you're adamant about this? And if so, why should we let these 9 or 10 businesses have kind of a stranglehold of the medical marijuana market in Louisiana?
Well, first of all, I haven't seen all of the amendments that went on the bill today. I will tell you that I asked the legislators with whom I spoke to preserve the existing architecture because we just created this program recently. And we told people if they wanted one of the pharmacy licenses, that if they got it, that there would be a regional territory where they would be the only ones that actually would have that license. And that created a certain value to having that license, and that in turn drove the amount that they invested. And for them to invest the money under the architecture that was set up, only to have that changed after they make the investment, I think would be fundamentally unfair. I also think it would be anti-business, because what business wants is predictability and stability. Tell them what the rules are, and then they will figure it out. But we shouldn't be changing the rules. So I thought that it was the right thing to do to make sure that as more patients seek to avail themselves of medical marijuana, that rather than having new pharmacy license issued, that they allow satellite locations within those regions that would be permitted under the licensee who already was licensed. I just think that that's fundamentally fair because of the bill that was passed recently, that created this architecture. The other thing that I wanted to make sure is that, for the same reasons, that the rug didn't get pulled out of it from underneath LSU and Southern University, who are the only two who are authorized to grow once they exercised the option that they had. And so I wanted to make sure that we weren't going to open that up to additional competition either, because they too had made investments based upon that architecture. And so those were the two, but as I understand it, Sam, the bill that I was shown, it was Representative McGee's bill. When he showed me the bill, that's the way his bill was at that time anyway. And so I expressed support for the bill that he had, and I gave him the same reasons that I just gave you.
Well, if I could, I guess at what point did these pharmacies make enough money that you say, okay, you've recouped your investment, we're going to let others in? Or do you think that indefinitely, perpetuity, these licensees should have a monopoly.
No, I don't know that you ever do anything in perpetuity, but you certainly don't make the change in the first year after they start dispensing product made from flour, right? Yes.
What's going on the Biden administration? The student loans, the $10,000 student loans?
Oh, yeah, I read about that. So I don't, the $10,000 student loans, and I probably should pass on the question. What I read was that there was $4.8 billion being forgiven in student debt associated with, was it Corinthian? It was a proprietary higher ed entity that went defunct, I think, in 2015, and saddled tens of thousands of Americans with debt, and most of them didn't get anything in exchange for that. And so if that's what you're talking about, I have no problem with that, because Corinthian had been authorized by the U.S. Department of Education to be in the business of education, and that's what made those loans possible in the first place. But whether that $4.8 billion consists of the $10,000 forgiveness per person, I'm not sure that we're talking about the same thing. But obviously I support what I read as it related to that defunct entity. Look, thank you all very much. I anticipate that sometime about 6:30 on Monday, we will be asking you to come back up. The session will be over, and we will do the session wrap-up that we normally do. Thank you all very much. Have a good weekend, and remember, it is hurricane season. Please get prepared. Thanks, and God bless.